right. So, I have two articles for you today in a rare Sunday video. One is about ICE, mainly putting the lie in the Trump administration's assertion that they're only going after the worst of the worst. For those of you who still haven't caught on to the fact that they're not going just after the worst of the worst. They may claim that they are, but as many things in this administration, reality doesn't comport to what they claim. And the second is going to be an update on a story I did on my last video about this woman crying that her religious freedom is being quashed. Her freedom of speech is being quashed because she got a 0 on an assignment because she didn't follow the directions of the freaking assignment. And I will also post a video to Forrest Valkai's takedown of this essay because the Oklahoman apparently published the essay, which is very unusual for an undergrad essay. That's something that you published when you are writing your graduate thesis, not some random undergrad paper. And it was very, very painful to watch. Forrest made it extremely entertaining, which is good because I probably would have needed copious amount of alcohol to get through it. But we'll get to that in a minute. Let me just make sure that this is big enough for me to read. Oops, wrong way. All right, so let's start with ICE. ICE has arrested nearly 75,000 people with no criminal records, data shows. And only the people who are hardcore MAGA, or at least hardcore racist and hardcore MAGA are the same thing, but just so desperately want to believe that this administration is just like any other and that they're doing a good thing. Maybe this will finally wake you up to the fact that no, they're not going just after the bad guys, which is very bizarre that there are so many people who seem to think that there's this immigration crime wave going on, which I have no idea where that comes from. I mean, I realize that the right-wingers are pushing that narrative, but I mean, even the people who live in the area where the immigrants come in should know that that's bullshit. Are there immigrants who commit crimes? Absolutely. Are there U.S. citizens who commit crimes? Absolutely. I do not know why there's this special fear of immigrants. I really don't. But anyway, to the article. More than a third of the roughly 220,000 people arrested by ICE officers in the first 9 months of the Trump administration had no criminal histories, according to new data. The data, which includes ICE arrests from January 20th to October 15th, show that nearly 75,000 people with no criminal records have been swept up in immigration operations that the president and his top officials have said would target murderers, rapists, and gang members. Or they will just make shit up like they did with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. This idea that first it was a clerical error and then Trump got a hold of it, and Trump is incapable of admitting fault. He's incapable of admitting that a mistake was made, because apparently that's a sign of weakness or something. So suddenly went from we made a mistake to, oh, he's a bad guy. I did an article recently about how ICE tried to deport an indigenous woman. And then they claimed that, oh no, that was meant for someone else. That was a mistake. Yeah, the only reason the Trump administration isn't then backtracking and trying to make a backstory about it is because she's an indigenous woman. And even they aren't that dumb. They understand what that word means. I've seen comments from people who obviously have no clue what indigenous means and seem to think it's perfectly fine that she was almost deported. I'm not quite sure where the fuck she would be deported to. Someone I follow on social media, I think it's on Threads, he's a Lakota. And people will tell him to go back to the country he came from. And he's just like, okay, which country would that be? Because, as usual, people just see that you're not white and assume that you must be from another country. Because that is how dumb people are. They look at Native Americans, and because shows make it sound like they don't exist anymore, they probably literally do not know that Native Americans still exist. Anyway, back to the article. It contradicts what the administration has been saying about people who are convicted criminals and that they are going after the worst of the worst, said Ariel Ruiz Soto, senior policy analyst at the Migration Policy Institute. And they will try to finagle it by saying, oh, all these people are criminals because they came into our country illegally, which technically true, but it's a freaking misdemeanor. The figures provide the most revealing look to date into the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. They were shared by the University of California, Berkeley's Deportation Data Project, which obtained them through a lawsuit brought against Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The data is compiled by an internal ICE office that handles arrest, detention, and deportation data. The administration stopped regularly posting detailed information on ICE arrests in January. Yeah, probably because A, they realized that they weren't actually arresting the worst of the worst, or simply the fact that people were calling them out on not just the fact that they weren't arresting the worst of the worst, but that they were also arresting American citizens because, brown person must be illegal. Speak Spanish must be illegal. Because, whoever heard of an American citizen who can speak more than one language? I realized that once upon a time that was a very rare event, that Native Americans, because they were mostly English settlers, then once upon a time you would mostly hear English. However, which is probably why we never had an official language declared. Because maybe, I don't know, because they said that we're a melting pot. So why do you need an official language in a country that is a melting pot? But anyway, which this administration doesn't seem to understand that. For arrestees with criminal histories, the data doesn't distinguish between those with a history of minor offenses and those who have committed more serious crimes like rape and murder, whom the administration has said it is targeting. Now, I'm pretty sure that people don't see a difference. That there are people like Stephen Miller. You're an immigrant who committed a crime. Well, we're going to deport you, even if it was just shoplifting. They don't see that as different because once you commit a crime, you're a hardened criminal. Because native born citizens never commit crimes, whether it's hardened or minor. No U.S. citizen has ever committed a crime ever. Just weird. And the figures do not include arrests made by Border Patrol, which has launched aggressive immigration operations in several cities, including Chicago, Los Angeles, and Charlotte, North Carolina. Border Patrol sweeps are currently underway in New Orleans. And I've heard horror stories about that. There is this woman who is a nurse who is dragged out of her car and is a U.S. citizen. And actually, from the brief look I saw, she looked white. And they treated her like a hardened criminal. Actually, they treated her horribly. They threw her on the ground, and she kept trying to tell people she's a U.S. citizen. Nobody seems to care. So I'm glad that I carry my passport everywhere I go. I'm glad I have a real ID because apparently being white doesn't save you anymore. All right. Border Patrol and ICE are both under the Department of Homeland Security, but they are two different agencies with two different missions, which, under the Trump administration, I really don't see a difference. Border Patrol agents typically operate along the southern and northern borders, but recently hundreds have been sent into the interior of the United States to track down undocumented immigrants. Hence why I say I'm not seeing a difference under this administration. That is the black box that we know nothing about, Ruiz Soto said. How many arrests is Border Patrol doing? How many of those are leading to removals and under what conditions? A Department of Homeland Security spokesperson did not respond to requests for comment. ICE field offices have been under intense pressure to ramp up arrests. Yes, because Stephen Miller has decided on a quota because he's an angry thumb come to life who is compensating for something. And he has a beautiful wife. I'm not sure what he feels he needs compensating for. But he's compensating for something because he's angry. He hates any and all immigrants, which, shocker, his, grandparents, great-grandparents came here? Because unless you're Native American, everybody came from somewhere. Just a matter of how close in your family tree that happened. But Stephen Miller has a hard-on for fascism, and as far as he's concerned, all immigration is bad, even legal. So of course ICE has to work extra hard to find the low-hanging fruit because they otherwise won't come close to meeting quotas. In mid-May, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller threatened to fire senior ICE officials if they did not begin arresting at least 3,000 migrants per day, NBC News previously reported. Which, come on. Once you're given a quota, that's basically a tacit admission that you're not actually caring about who gets swept up in this. You're not actually concerned about the worst of the worst. You are actually just wanting to get rid of non-white people because they've started doing just that. If you're brown, if you speak Spanish, you must be an illegal and they're going to round you up. And even Kristi Noem said, oh, there's no racial profiling going on. I really cannot wait till the World Cup comes to the U.S. to see how many empty seats are going to be in these stadiums. Not because I want the World Cup to bomb spectacularly, but because they go after anyone who's brown. And let's face it, most people who are the biggest fans in the U.S. of international soccer are Hispanic. So they're going to be scared to death to come out and support, whether it's Team USA or a different team. They're going to be afraid because Kristi Noem said that ICE is going to be. And let's face it, if you are an undocumented worker, you are not going to be able to afford the World Cup, just like you're not going to be able to afford to go to the Super Bowl. But that's not stopping Kristi Noem from saying ICE will target these areas, these entertainment venues, simply because that's not the point of this. They just want to go after all the Hispanics because they have admitted, actually, in their national security safety document, I think it's called, that they want this nation to be just white people. Anyway, but the new data shows that ICE is still falling well short of those targets. Of course they are, because there aren't 3,000 that many criminals who are also undocumented. So it's one thing to say, I want you to arrest all the hardened criminals, or even those who have deportation orders. I mean, there is a process, and unless they violate their deportation order, I can see you wanting to deport them, but there's still a process. Even though there's a deportation order, my understanding is that it's not necessarily final and that there's still a process. So even then, but these people aren't doing that. They're going after anybody and anyone who is not speaking English and who happens to not have white skin. It's just maddening how many people are still defending this and then think that they are non-racist. Okay, if you're not racist, then why are you defending people going after innocent people just because they happen to be non-white or they dare to speak a language outside of English? Okay? And I'll get to an aside later to that. ICE agents have made an average daily total of 824 arrests since January 20th, according to the data. Those figures are still more than double the average daily arrest total under the Biden administration in 2024, when ICE arrested 312 people per day. Because, they're going after people who actually deserve to be arrested, as opposed to now where it's like, we're going after anyone and everyone because we have a quota. The data also reveals that about 90% of people ICE arrested through mid-October were male. Mexican nationals accounted for the largest share of the overall arrests. Shocker. With about 85,000, followed by nationals of Guatemala at 31,000 and Honduras at 24,000. More than 60% of those who were arrested were between the ages of 25 and 45. Huh. Can't imagine why. Now we're really feeling the pain in the workforce, says George Carrillo, Chief Executive Officer of the Hispanic Construction Council. Exactly. Because they're the ones who employ these people. Now, there can be a discussion about businesses that rely on undocumented immigrants. Absolutely. Not necessarily migrant labor, because my understanding is that they do have some sort of documentation. I could be wrong, but I think so. So if you want to make that argument, then fine, but also understand that a lot of American citizens don't want to do these jobs. So they have to get the workers from somewhere. Carrillo praised the Trump administration for its efforts to secure the border, but said the ongoing enforcement operations are having a significant impact on companies that employ migrant workers. Now even the most conservative Republicans are feeling it and understanding that, hey, something different has to be done because now it is affecting their businesses, he said, and they're worried about this strategy. A la Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was all rah, kick them all out until, oops, my construction company is losing workers because we employed migrant workers. And they're being deported. What are we going to do now? So, yeah. It's not clear from the data how many of those who were arrested were deported, but 22,959 are listed under the category of voluntary departure, meaning they left the United States of their own accord. Now, there are people who have been self-deporting, whether it's because fear or just because they're like, yeah, I've had it with this country. I'm just, gonna take my chances with my home country or maybe another country, a third country. Which, can't say I blame them. Ironically, they're not the only ones who are leaving the U.S., but which I will get to in a moment. ICE is currently holding 65,000 migrants in detention centers around the country, according to DHS data posted online, which apparently those conditions are just horrible. I mean, I wouldn't say all the detention centers, but some of them are just horrible. Absolutely horrible. Now, as for losing citizens, we are losing conservative Christians. They are moving to Russia because they are so scared of woke and having their kids being taught that gay people exist, that they're going to Russia where it's pretty much illegal to be gay. They say it's just against propaganda, but no. Anyone who's been paying attention knows that's not true. And they're finding out the hard way that the very thing that they complained about immigrants in this country, the undocumented ones, they're experiencing on their end. Like, oh, you mean you have to know Russian to go to state schools? These are the same people who probably would scream, speak English to a Native American who dared to speak their native tongue to friends, family, because obviously when you're walking down the street, you need to be able to hear everybody and understand everybody's conversations, which is just bizarre to me. There are people who speak more than one language, and if they want to speak a language other than English to a friend or family member, even if they're in public, they can do that. I mean, a lot of them probably do that because they do not want other people to understand them. And that's perfectly okay. So, and now they're whining because, oh, you mean you need to learn Russian? What did you expect? Unlike this country that doesn't have an official language, they do. It's Russian. I do not understand. Do you think you're so fucking special that people kowtow to you wherever you go? It's just bizarre. Anyway, tangent over. Let's move on to my update. And this is from News 9 out of Oklahoma City. Hundreds protest after OU places graduate instructor on leave for giving student failing grade. All right, so that's good to see that. Now, this, like I said, this is Oklahoma. So most of these kids probably are Christian, whether it be because they're mostly from Oklahoma or mostly from this country. Most people in this country are Christians. So the chances are that most, if not all, of her classmates were Christian. And yet, none of them seem to be having a problem with the concept of, this is a science class, this is not a Bible study class. I do not understand what the hell. But anyway. Hundreds filled the University of Oklahoma's campus Friday afternoon during a protest calling on the university to protect its professors. An OU graduate instructor was recently placed on administrative leave after a student claimed she received a failing grade on assignment for quoting the Bible, which she never quoted the Bible. Like I said, I'm going to link you a video to Forrest Belkai reading her essay, because the Oklahoman printed her essay. Not just that, but he also has her interaction with her instructors about why she got a failing grade. And nowhere did she quote the Bible. She mentioned the Bible and her interpretation of it, but she never actually quotes it. Because just like everything about this whole assignment, she doesn't know what words mean. And what's very frightening is that she's a junior and a pre-med student. I'm sorry, how the hell are you going into a biological science profession and not wanting to accept the science part? Because medical science accepts that trans is a thing. That this and she seems to be of the mind that her biblical beliefs should preclude anybody else's scientific understanding. You want to believe the Bible over everything else? Great. What the hell are you doing in a science program? For one thing, a science program, a science class, and how the hell did you make it into your junior year? All right. And like I said, there were no quotes. Critics of the essay say the student did not meet the assignment's requirements. And like I said, Forrest goes through it. He even shows the painstaking instructions and the leeway she was given to cite her biblical beliefs as a reason for not accepting the results of the conclusions of this paper that she was supposed to summarize and either agree or disagree with their points. And you can do that. You can even use your your Christian beliefs, as long as you make a decent argument out of it, which she did not. But OU junior Samantha Fulnecki claimed she was discriminated against because of her religion, sparking national attention. OU said the failed assignment would not count against Fulnecki's final grade in the course, because nothing says we're a serious academic institution than letting someone bully the institution because she's too fucking privileged to accept that her view of the world isn't, that people just don't bow to her infinite wisdom about things. Okay, you don't agree with science. Great. Again, what the fuck are you doing in a science class? And how is it that you made it to your junior year? I read the essay because I watched the video with Forrest Velkai. He went over the essay. And the way she writes, it's like, I'm sorry, what grade are you in again? Graduate students at OU are also condemning the university's treatment of the graduate instructor. Exactly, because let's face it, if nothing else, this could potentially affect other graduate students, because all an undergraduate would have to do is whine about religious freedom and their careers could be over quickly, simply because, like in the case of Samantha, they have a bone to pick with academia. Because that's the only reason I can figure, and Forrest can figure, why she would be in a science program when she totally doesn't accept science. Like I mentioned in my previous video, fake it. Pretend that you give a shit. This is not helpful. Let's see, where was I? On Thursday night, the OU Graduate Student Senate passed a resolution calling on the university to formally apologize to the instructor and protect them from further harassment. I appreciate that. I really hope that this gets the same amount of attention that the initial complaint did, because people need to see what is happening at Oklahoma. Forrest Velkai is a graduate of Oklahoma State, and he's like, oh, thank God. So, yeah. So that was a very short article, but yeah, OU is capitulating to this person simply because they do not want to be seen as quashing religious freedom, when the instructor took great pains to point out that this has nothing to do with your religious belief. If you just framed your religious belief in such a way that it made a coherent, compelling argument, then that would have been fine. But you didn't do that. I mean, no undergraduate, especially an upperclassman, I mean, you should be ashamed of what you put out. She did like 2 sentences where she even mentions the article, and she just says the article. Whereas everybody knows you have to mention what article you are discussing. I mean, just because that's the article that the students were given to read and to discuss, you have to treat the essay as if the person reading it has no clue. I mean, you're a junior, you're in pre-med, and Never in your life were you taught that. Like Forrest Belkai says, no wonder Oklahoma is 50th in education. What the hell? Anyway, that is all I have for this video. And if you're going to come at me about trans ideology and then whine that I do not respond to serious opinions. No, once you decided that it's an ideology that trans and their allies worship, simply because you can't accept that all the sciences accept that it's not an ideology, that it's an actual thing. No, you are not arguing in good faith. You are just wanting to couch your hatred and make it sound like I'm just afraid to debate you. No, I'm not afraid. I just learned early on. And whenever I make the mistake of debating because people are whining that I won't, then I just regret it because they don't have any shame. And if I point out that this is not a thing happening, they will just claim that I don't want to protect kids and whine, and rage quit. As if, I'm the bad guy here who's pushing disinformation, even though I called you out on your comments and you whined that I called you out. Because that makes sense. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble. So with that, I will see you guys in the next video.